collective to listen.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Central capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. It is Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, and this is for all of you wrestling fans. We're talking about the irresistible force, or more appropriately, the forces in the form of Mnuchin and Powell. They're two of the biggest voices on fiscal and stimulus policy, and they meet the immovable object. I'm stumbling through this because you can tell I'm not a wrestling fan, but thank God our producer, Ariel Agami, is.
Yeah, and if anybody knows what the heck Carol Masser was just talking about, because you're an old school wrestling fan, you need to tweet her at Carol Masser to show your credibility when it comes to the world of the ring.
I had to Google to understand it, but it is about It was fascinating to see Mnuchin and Powell up on Capitol Hill meeting with lawmakers, because basically the future of this economy in many ways is in their hands.
Right, in all of their hands in many ways. And to some extent, Powell was an immovable object when it came to getting baited about fiscal policy. We're going to get into that and much more with Michael McKee. He's been watching it very closely, and Dave Wilson. But first, Charlie Pellet, he's got an update on how the market reacted to all this. Hey, Charlie.
We are looking at, let me give you a quote on WWE shares. World Wrestling Entertainment, they're up now by 1.6%. The Dow lower, S&P, NASDAQ, they are both higher right now. Key takeaway, investors grappling with gains and losses for the S&P 500 index, up 4 now, 29.57 on your S&P, higher by 0.1%. Has not been the case for much of the session, fluctuating between gains and losses there. We have got the Dow down 57, a drop there of 0.2%. NASDAQ up 72. That is a gain of 0.8%. Your 10-year up 4/32. Yield right now 0.71%. Gold up 0.6% at $17.43 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down by 1.5%, $32.31 a barrel. One quick note involving J.P. Morgan Chase shareholders have elected all 10 directors nominated to the board, even after several large pensions urged them to withhold votes from members including Lee Raymond, former ExxonMobil Corp boss. J.P. Morgan Chase shares, they're lower now by 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. We'll be checking in with you throughout the afternoon and early evening to get the latest business headlines. So as promised, let's set the Business Week agenda now with Michael McKee, international economics and policy correspondent for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from New York City, along with Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg, author of the chart and stock of the day. He's on our remote line from New Jersey. Mike, let's start with you. Help us understand what we heard from those pair of financial and monetary heavyweights, Skyped in or Zoomed in or Google Meeted in, however they were testifying before Congress today.
The irresistible forces, as we're calling them today.
I'm still trying to figure out what Carol was talking about.
Yeah.
Google wrestling.
That makes many of us. You're in good company.
Hey, all right.
Did anybody notice these guys were out of focus for half of the hearing? I thought that was kind of interesting. This was a hearing about the CARES Act. The law sets up a requirement that the Fed chairman and the Treasury secretary report 4 times a year to Congress on the procedures and what's happened, the successes, and presumably, hopefully, not a lot of failures of the act. And so this was the first hearing on it. And I think everybody's trying to figure out exactly what they need to know. So there are a lot of different kinds of questions, but it basically came down to four things. One was the Main Street lending program for middle-sized companies. That's not up and running yet. And so there were concerns expressed about when that happens and who's going to get the money and how they're going to determine whether they're creditworthy. Powell said basically they think they'll get it up and running by the end of May. And so the question remains, is that going to be soon enough? There were questions about the Paycheck Protection Program, and obviously we know the problems that has had. And Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, said they're working on fixes and tweaks to that. There were also questions about the secondary buying program. People are kind of put off by people on Capitol Hill kind of put off by the idea the Fed might be buying junk bonds. And Powell tried to reassure them that they're not buying them in bulk. They're only buying fallen angels and only a small amount, and the idea is to keep the market open, and by suggesting there is a buyer of last resort, then that creates other buyers. So that's not a problem. And then the municipal one, the municipal lending facility, which is also not operating yet, there's a lot of concern about states and localities and first responders and the idea that they might be losing their jobs. And that was the part where Jay Powell suggested Congress may need to do more. He tried to stay away from giving Congress advice. He was not as forceful about it as he was on 60 Minutes. But that was the one area in which he said you may want to think about doing something because we're a lending program, not a spending program.
Right, exactly. And a good reminder. Dave Wilson, come on in on it because we've been watching the markets throughout the day. Little changed here, certainly after yesterday's rally. So a very different trade today. What's interesting about the internals? What does it tell us about how investors are approaching this? And maybe what they heard or didn't hear from Mnuchin and Powell?
Well, maybe that they were paying so much attention that they didn't really push share prices around much at all. You look at the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500, you see tech stocks kind of leading the way, consumer discretionary, which is, you talk about an economically sensitive area, you're talking about, retailers who are coming out with earnings, and a lot of them aren't being all that well received. I mean, you've got Walmart down, you've got Home Depot down. They both had numbers out today for their fiscal first quarters. Beyond that, though, I mean, you've got the home builders higher. So, there is at least some level of confidence about what the consumer is going to do down the line. And then you stand on its head and energy stocks are down. How many times have we seen that? So, you put it all together. I mean, it doesn't, look conclusive necessarily just in terms of industry groups when it comes to where the economy's headed. So, perhaps, the back and forth, with Congress is getting more attention than anything else.
And if you look at the S&P 500, it's almost an even split in terms of names in that index, what's going on. Hey, Mike, just about 20 seconds here. I mean, Powell, I feel like, though, continues to be a champion for the little guy. Is that fair?
Yeah, that was fair. He made the point again today that the people who are being hurt the most are the people at the lower income levels, especially those who are considered essential workers and who have to go face this every day, which is part of the reason he urged Congress to do more to help them and to prevent their layoffs.
Right. Certainly something we heard from Sheryl Sandberg yesterday, right? She talked about her own family, right? A lot of healthcare workers on the front lines, people who have to go to work. We got to make sure we're taking care of everybody.
Mike McKee, you got a big interview coming up this afternoon that can be heard right here on Bloomberg Radio.
4 o'clock, we'll talk with Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren, and he's the guy who's going to be running the Main Street lending program. So that should be interesting.
Well, that sounds very timely. We look forward to that. All right, you can hear that right here at the top of the 4 o'clock hour. Michael McKee, go get ready for that. We appreciate your time as always. Dave Wilson, you'll be back with us in just a bit, around 3:30 with your chart of the day and later your stock of the day. Carol?
So we should talk quickly about what's coming up, right?
We should.
We've got quite a lineup. We heard about the Federal Reserve Bank Boston President Eric Rosengren, so that will be coming up shortly. We've also got the President of Porsche North America, Klaus Elmer, back with us. So is the CEO of Trivago, Axel Heifer, and Dr. Patrice Harris, President of the AMA. We're going to get the latest on the virus with her.
Yeah, looking forward to all of that. It's a packed show as always. Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day before we run off to the next thing. It's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, Carol, $2.4 trillion. A group of companies worth that combined amount, $2.4 trillion. They've added their voice to a growing chorus calling for the economic recovery from the coronavirus to be green. And company you spent some time with recently.
Unilever is among them. So is Adobe. More than 150 other companies. They've signed this statement. They're asking officials to ensure that their response to the pandemic is, quote, grounded in bold climate action and to prioritize moving to, quote, a green economy by aligning policies and recovery plans with the latest climate science. I have to tell you, just kind of reading a bunch of things, more people are talking about, what's going on in this health pandemic affecting the world. It's making them think a lot more about the climate change and how that's impacting the world. These big issues that's going to require a public-private response in order for it to make a difference, right? I think a lot of people are really thinking about these things that are impacting us that aren't getting any better, and we've got to do something.
Well, it takes me back to the conversation we had yesterday with Richard Edelman about sort of thinking about it much more holistically and how you come back from that and how a company especially is different. All right, much more ahead. First, let's get to Nancy Lyons down in D.C. She's got world national headlines. Hey there, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. Well, as Michael McKee was telling you, Fed Reserve Chairman Jay Powell and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin were on Capitol Hill today, providing details of the CARES Act to provide support to the economy during the pandemic. Mnuchin wants an easing of social distancing guidelines as soon as possible to restart the economy.
There is the risk of permanent damage, and as I've said before, we're conscious of the health issues, and we want to do this in a balanced and safe way.
Mnuchin says he expects a rebound to begin in the second half of the year. Fed Chairman Powell, though, sees a longer road to recovery and does not expect we'll get there until the end of next year. A group of philanthropists is urging Congress to require charitable groups to give more during the pandemic. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager reports.
The group is known as Patriotic Millionaires. Its members include Walt Disney heiress Abigail Disney, Susan and Regan Pritzker of the billionaire Pritzker family, and early Google developer Ning Mossberger Tang. They're asking Congress to double the minimums that private foundations and donor-advised funds give to charity each year, from 5% of total assets for foundations to 10%. Scott Wallace of the Wallace Global Fund says higher mandates would add another $200 billion to charities over 3 years without costs to taxpayers. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
U.S. officials say the USS Theodore Roosevelt will return to sea later this week, nearly 2 months after the ship was sidelined in Guam with a rapidly growing coronavirus outbreak. The ship will set sail with a scaled-back crew of about 3,000. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Why can't you just go to some remote island and wait till all this is over?
The range of outcomes is so wide.
Because it's your job.
What do you think some of the structural changes might result?
Fortunately, it's our job too.
How's the value done in this market?
Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
It's very hard to make a forecast.
Bloomberg Markets.
This could be a lower for longer type of hit.
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud to present a Boston Pop salute to our heroes. This Independence Day, the orchestra's 4th of July tradition continues. The program will feature guest artists, highlights from past fireworks displays, new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis, and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen Saturday, July 4th, starting at 8 Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and right here on Bloomberg Radio.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events. He does! Fabry wins it! To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow lower, S&P, NASDAQ higher. Technology shares pushing the NASDAQ Composite Index up for a fourth day, while the broader U.S. equity market fluctuates in the wake of a strong start to the week for risk assets. S&P swinging between gains and losses. Right now, it is up 7 points, higher by 3 0.3%. The Dow is down 28 points, lower by 0.1%. NASDAQ up 78, a gain there of 0.8%. We've got the 10-year up 4/32 with a yield of 0.71%. Gold up 0.7%, 17.44 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2% now at $32.53 a barrel. After earnings, Walmart down 0.8%. Home Depot down 1.6%. Urban Outfitters reports after the bell. Urban Outfitters shares lower now by 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellop. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I realized getting ready for this show that we've got a trio of guests from Atlanta today. Very excited about that. And our first is Patrice Harris. She is back with us, Dr. Patrice Harris. She's the president of the American Medical Association, on the phone from the ATL, my hometown. Dr. Harris, really nice to have you back with us. A very timely conversation, and your geography is relevant in part because that's where I want to start. Help us understand what reopening looks like so far. It's top of mind for all of us.
Well, thank you for having me, and glad to know you are a fellow ATLian. Certainly we've been concerned, the AMA physicians across this country have been concerned about premature reopening, especially without regard to data and metrics. And the original plan from the administration's task force was really a good plan, and it set forth at least 14 days of decreased infections. And so I'm really concerned. I remain concerned. And I just read a report today about a church in Georgia who has been open for a couple of weeks, but several of the members have now become positive, and so they are reclosing. So we certainly need to be careful on this reopening and be measured before we do so, before we relax restrictions.
So do we need to, so is that you kind of saying we're going too fast?
It could be in certain situations, and again, it does depend on the data. That's why it's so important, I think, to make sure that there are metrics in place to review the number of hospitalizations, not just the positive cases. We need to look at the testing in context. Now, look, if we increase testing, we are likely to get increased number of tests as an absolute number. So we also need the denominator. We need the bottom number. We need the number of infections over how much we are testing. We need to track hospitalizations. We need to have this data by zip code so we can target interventions and know what areas we need to focus on. For instance, if there's an area where the case numbers are low, no new infections, no hospitalizations, then you could proceed more quickly. So it's all about having the metrics and loosening restrictions based on the data.
Well, and Dr. Harris, it also feels like it's sort of embedded in what you're saying is consistency of data, too. And I feel like I've read and heard a lot about that we're not always getting true sort of apples-to-apples comparisons across regions or maybe even within a state. Are you guys at the AMA sort of working on anything related to that to help ensure that we are making the right comparisons here?
Well, I have been really concerned about the lack of standard data collection. Now, in fact, of course, the AMA wrote early on in recognition of the fact that blacks were overrepresented in the number of deaths. So we asked for some standard data collection. And, of course, we asked for data collection on race and ethnicity. So we really do need to be comparing apples to apples. I posted something yesterday on my social media about the importance of a more standardized method for data collection because, the virus doesn't stop at county borders or state borders. And so it's very important at the very least we are all looking at the same set of numbers so we can have greater understanding of the data.
Dr. Harris, so why is it that we don't, you said, the metrics are very important. We need to really have standardization when it comes to the data collection. So why is it that I can have my home device, whether it's Google or Amazon, they know when I'm out of something or probably should be reordering something. They can do so much. Why is it that there's so much information out there, yet we don't yet have the standardization and the metrics, the census, right? I think about how many things I got on that. Why is it that we haven't been able to create some kind of standardized system for data collection?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? And let me just say, of course, being in Atlanta and working personally, of course, the AMA has a lot of partnerships with the CDC, and I'm a former health director. I can tell you that public health from the national level, from the state and the local level, has been underfunded over the last several years, and that we need the funding. We need to get the support to public health so that they can modernize data collection and make sure the data collection is standardized. So that would help. We need to get the resources into the public health community. But
help me out some, because Americans spend something like $3.6 trillion on healthcare. And I understand that's going to services and supporting hospitals and so on and so forth and facilities. But why isn't some of that money at this point in the game, creating some kind of system so that we have great data collection?
Well, certainly that is our recommendation from the AMA, and we have called, again, from the very beginning for a coordinated strategy because, again, this requires some coordination with federal leadership, and that has been our ask since the very beginning, not just on data collection, but also on supplies and testing and PPE. So we will continue to raise and amplify that issue. I'll say something more broadly, even pre-COVID-19. Public health is difficult to explain because it's almost public health is works best when people don't even know it, right? When no one gets sick at a restaurant because of infections. And so it is my hope that everyone now has a better understanding of the importance of public health in the overall healthcare ecosystem. And that we look at more resources and we certainly pay attention to improve data collection.
All right, Dr. Harris, stick with us. President of the AMA, she's going to be back with us in just a few minutes. We're going to do some news, including the fact California COVID-19 cases rising 1.7% versus a 7-day average, Carol, of 2.37%. So trending in the right direction there. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Much more ahead, including with Dr. Patrice Harris. Stick with us. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Looks like yesterday's buying frenzy on Wall Street was a one and done. Stocks are mixed, with the Dow stuck in the red, down 79. Technology shares are gaining for a fourth day, pushing the NASDAQ up 62. The S&P 500 is up 2 points. Stockpiling of toilet paper, sanitizer, and other pandemic supplies boosted Walmart sales in the first quarter. U.S. same-store sales jumped 10% from a year ago. It was the fastest pace in nearly 2 decades and stronger than expected. Home building slowed to a crawl last month with much of the industry in coronavirus lockdown. The government says housing starts plunged more than 30%, the most in records going back more than half a century. It'll be an extra long Memorial Day weekend for Citigroup employees. They've been given an extra day off on Friday as thanks for their hard work during the pandemic. Those who must work Friday will get another day off instead. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. This Independence Day, it's a Boston pop.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up at the Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick 6 podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick 6 on TuneIn to listen.
Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Patrice Harris at the American Medical Association. So many things to ask her about vaccines, second wave, and that medicine that the president is taking.
I got a lot of questions on that one. All right, let's get back to your top business stories and another update on the trading day. Here is once again Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. It is a mixed Tuesday with the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 43 points now, lower by 0.2%. The S&P up 6, up by 0.2%. NASDAQ higher by 70, up by 0.8%. Technology shares pushing the NASDAQ Composite Index higher for a fourth day, while the broader equity market struggles to push higher following yesterday's strong start to the trading week for risk assets. Right now, we've got the S&P up 5, up 0.2. As I mentioned, the Dow down 51, NASDAQ up 68, a gain there of 0.7%. 10-year up 4/30 seconds with a yield of 0.71%. Gold is up 0.8%, $17.45 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 1.7% now at $32.36 a barrel. With so many unknowns about the coronavirus, one of the big questions involves demographics, specifically the age range of those being hospitalized. Nasa Ernst is nurse manager at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Television.
The majority of the age group that we're seeing here at Hopkins that's impacted is actually in the 30 to 50-year-old range. It is spread across all ranges, but that was very surprising to us to see that it wasn't just the elderly population.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. After earnings, Walmart down by 1%, Home Depot down 1.5%. We'll be hearing from Urban Outfitters after the closing bell. Urban Outfitters down now by 1.1%. Citigroup CEO Michael Corbat has told employees they can take an extra day off this Friday after working, quote, harder than ever in response to the coronavirus pandemic. In a memo to staff, Corbat acknowledged many have been juggling workloads, homeschooling children, taking care of family members, or even continuing to go into the office. Citigroup last month said roughly 80% of its employees around the world are doing their jobs remotely, but Friday, for Citigroup employees, a lot of them will be able to take the day off. Recapping, equities trading mixed with the S&P up 7, up 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Our guest at this hour is Dr. Patrice Harris, president of the American Medical Association, joining us on the phone from Atlanta. Hey, I just want to, Dr. Harris, if I may, just one more question in terms of data collection, because someone calling me out on Twitter and saying, wait a minute, you ask, as if the data collection from tech companies is a good thing. And this individual says, I disagree. Privacy is more important. Is that part of what's holding everything up, is the privacy concerns, which are important ones? But I just do wonder if that's what's slowing down our ability to really get some standardized data collection when it comes to the virus.
I don't think it's necessarily slowing down progress on using technology, but it is an important consideration. At the AMA, we've been engaged, and we just released what we call our privacy principles around data. And so I just don't think that integrating privacy and concerns about confidentiality should slow the process down. It should inform the process, but just from my viewing, it doesn't necessarily have to slow the process down. We'll just have to take that into consideration as we use use technology. And I will say, because, contact tracing is not new, right? We've been using that in public health for some time. Technology has a role to play, but, we cannot forget the human connection. Even before COVID-19, we may be contacting someone and letting them know some not so great information, some difficult information. So it's about integrating appropriately technology with the human touch.
Well, and the human touch, I feel like, is front of mind for people as they try and reopen. We talked a little bit about that a few minutes ago. Dr. Harris, how much are you worried about a second wave of this hitting in the fall?
Well, I'm extremely worried. That's been the worry all along from the beginning. I think we should remind everyone that one of the reasons, and this is my term, our emergency mitigation, where we really encourage everyone to shelter in place, because as you recall, we were worried about making decisions about who would get on a ventilator if we did not have a ventilator. So I think people forget that. And so appropriately, we are having conversations about loosening these restrictions, but we have to make sure, again, that we are measured in our approach. And if we go slowly, if there's a slight uptick, we know that data immediately, and we can immediately reassess and readjust. That is how we should be moving forward, loosening, reassessing, and readjusting as necessary.
But it is scary when you see China doing another lockdown, I think, of more than 100 million people, and I think specifically Wuhan. So, it isn't a clear, straight path forward, and that certainly is nerve-wracking. The other thing, we're all trying to figure out treatments. What did you make of the president coming out and saying that he is taking hydroxychloroquine, and this is a drug? I mean, the AMA has come out and actually cautioned against the use of some of these medicines, including, I believe, this. So what is your takeaway from that?
Well, here's where we stand at the AMA. We start and begin with the science and the evidence and the facts. And as of today, there is no evidence that hydroxychloroquine works either in treatment or in the prevention of COVID-19. Research trials are underway as we speak regarding hydroxychloroquine, and we really need to let the research pan out to know if this is safe. But what we do know now is the FDA has cautioned against the use of hydroxychloroquine outside of the hospital setting or where it can't be monitored. So we stand with the science and the evidence.
Just got about 30 seconds. Does this complicate, though, AMA members, doctors who are out in the field when the president does this and maybe patients come to them? I'm just curious what you're hearing, and just quickly if you could.
Okay, well, it doesn't complicate. You know, physicians have always had shared decision-making with our patients going over the risk and the benefits, and we talk about the benefits even when they're life-threatening. So this is our usual course of work.
All right. Well, great to catch up with you. We always appreciate your time, Dr. Patrice Harris, president of the American Medical Association, joining us on the phone from Atlanta. And, you know, a clear takeaway there is the data, the consistency of data, and the ability to really compare and contrast. And I was glad that Dr. Harris called back to our earlier conversation where she was talking about those underrepresented and exposed in many cases populations, really over-indexing in some of the different socioeconomic sectors there. So an important reminder there. Much more ahead. First, let's get to Washington, D.C. Nancy Lyons is there with World and National Headlines.
Thanks, Jason. Lawmakers on the Senate Banking Committee today urged the Treasury Secretary to move faster on hundreds of billions of dollars in loans for businesses and local governments. Today's hearing came the day after a Congressional Oversight Committee found Treasury has spent only a small portion of a $500 billion fund created by the CARES Act. As for jobs, Secretary Stephen Mnuchin thinks the country is not out of the woods yet.
I have said publicly, and I'll say again, I think the job numbers will get worse before they get better. So I just want to be very clear that I think that June will be a very difficult quarter.
Well, it's a big question on the minds of Americans as summer approaches. Will there be any sports to watch? Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
As pro leagues make tentative plans, they're getting a boost from some governors. New York's Andrew Cuomo says he's encouraging teams to plan games in empty arenas.
The games could be televised. New York State will help those major sports franchises to do just that.
And California's Gavin Newsom is eyeing June.
Without spectators and modifications and very prescriptive conditions.
But among the many unresolved questions, what to do if a player, coach, or team staffer tests positive for the coronavirus? Could the team's games be postponed or relocated, or should they be canceled? Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
Annie Glenn has reportedly died of COVID-19 complications. She was the wife of astronaut and U.S. Senator John Glenn. She was 100 years old and had been a strong communication disorders advocate. She herself had a severe stutter. An Ohio State University official confirmed her death. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, They've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need to know.
The force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it. You have that power too.
For the first time ever, stream the complete Skywalker saga, all in one place. 9 incredible films, one epic story, only on Disney+.
The Force will be with you. Always.
The Skywalker Saga on Disney+. Now streaming. 18+ subscription required. T's and C's apply.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up into Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick 6 podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick 6 on TuneIn to listen. Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time? I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Do want to begin with a number of headlines out of Washington, specifically the U.S. Labor Department, which says it will end all data lockups regardless of the virus. The Labor Department says it will make the suspension of media lockups permanent and says the end of media lockups will be effective on June 3rd. It is a mixed day on Wall Street with the Dow Dow and the Dow Jones Industrial Average are trading lower. The S&P and NASDAQ, they are both advancing. Right now, we've got the S&P up 8, a gain there of 0.3%. The Dow is lower by 16 points. Little change now, down less than 0.1%, while NASDAQ is up 78. Technology shares advancing today. NASDAQ up 79 points. That is a gain of 0.9%. 10-year up 3/30 seconds with a yield of 0.71%. Gold is up 0.7%, 17.45 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 2.1%, 32.50 a barrel. Again, recapping here: S&P up 10, a gain of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, certainly we were talking about this yesterday as we watched a mega rally, Carol Massar, and the stock market basically like, cool, there's a slight possibility there might be a vaccine that's sort of working. I'm in. Buy. And driving the market up the most in more than a month and to its highest levels since early March. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like it's like a stubborn toddler or teenager, right? You tell them to do one thing and they do another. Well, that is today's equity markets. And there's this great story in the magazine. It's also on the Bloomberg and online at Bloomberg.com. It's written by Mike Regan, who follows the markets for us. And it's all about how the equity markets are kind of ignoring what we're seeing nonstop, the doom that is everywhere. So let's get into it and talk about it with Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber joining us on the phone from Brooklyn. And it's so true, Joel, you know, to see the rally yesterday, I had people calling us out on Twitter like, wait a minute, you guys, how can you buy into this so quickly? There's a lot of steps that still have to happen to get a vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are just absolutely confused by what's been happening in the equity market. And yesterday was an example of that. It's like almost like the stock market is living in a reality that's, 100% buying into hope and hype and just wants this pandemic to be over. And in reality, I think a lot of us are wrestling with the other truth, which is like the economy seems to have collapsed. This looks like a really long road ahead of us, and so it's sort of like this weird juxtaposition that people are trying to figure out, like what is going on right now.
And Joel, how do you frame this in the magazine, during this time? Because as always, you're sort of coming at this from all sorts of angles. What do you think is distinct about the market angle here, other than what seems like the sort of bizarro world that we're living in?
That's a great question. I think Mike brings it to this TINA. There is no alternative to stocks. And I think that is sort of what we're ultimately talking about here. If ultra safe treasuries is dancing close to 0% like you write, then you really only have one option, and that looks like equities. And so that has been, kind of back to a theme of the last 10 years, frankly, right. Back in the good days. And now it's actually, we're living through a version of the same thing where the equities seem like the only thing that have any chance of a pop. And so hence why investors are fleeing there.
Right, exactly. It was the trade for so long coming off the financial crisis with rates so low that why would you go into something like fixed income? You're going to go into equities because it just makes sense. It's just a comparative trade. The other thing, though, and Mike puts this in his story, the golden put. And Bloomberg Opinions, Noah Smith dubs it the golden put. We're talking about the Fed and Jay Powell.
Yeah, totally. Jason, were you going to say something there?
I was going to totally agree with that, and also point out that we're seeing it real time this week, right? I mean, with Powell up on Capitol Hill and talking on 60 Minutes, he's going to talk again tomorrow. He's the guy. Everybody's betting on Powell to some extent, right?
Totally, and just I think last time we actually had Mike on the program, it basically is like Jay Powell to some extent has been the most perfect Fed chair for this moment, right? And has really kept everyone basically like having confidence in the market, I think. And that kind of is a testament to Jay Powell. Now, the question sort of remains, I think, like what other ammo might the Fed need to resort to? And, some of the things that, we could potentially see, I suppose, are the negative rates, which he threw a little shade on that. But then there's also the idea of just the Fed outright buying equities, which, is something that happened in Japan as well. So it was unthinkable once upon a time, and it may not remain unthinkable either.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting, though, and as one quote in Mike's story, Joel, is, and this is Peter Bookvar, certainly familiar to our audience, he points out, but the Fed, they can't print earnings, needed to pay interest expenses, they can't print jobs, they can't create antivirals and a vaccine and get people confident to shop without risk until then. So it's like a reminder that the Fed, and even Mike McKee, who we had on earlier, there are limits to what the Fed can do, which is why we're pushing at this point policymakers in Washington to do more.
Which, they seem to be punting now a bit as well. Like, and that's, the source of that tension. I think the other thing just to bear in mind here is, and we've kind of talked about, Jason, to your earlier question of like, how do we frame this? In another way that we've been seeing this play out in the markets is sort of just the big are getting bigger, right? Yeah. And I think that will only sort of remain so because those business models are so mature, I think, compared to other options that are out there. But yet, the other thing in the background that we've also just known is all this antitrust talk. And if that starts to sort of bubble over the summer, it really makes you wonder how the market would respond to some of those variables.
Joel, it's funny that you say the big get bigger because as I was watching the testimony earlier and watching Jay Powell get a little bit of criticism for working with BlackRock, I thought back to a story you and I worked on those many years ago about Blackstone versus BlackRock and how they have both come to just dominate their respective corners of the market. I mean, it is remarkable how Wall Street will play a very determinative role in all of this. Ultimately, how it gets played out, whether it's as a disperser of capital or as at least a key figure amid all of this.
I think the BlackRock one is especially the one that I think markets are people near markets are very much eyeing since it's basically become a little bit like Goldman, frankly, in terms of the role that it is beginning to play in sort of that Wall Street DC connection. And there's a vibe that almost feels a little bit like it's another branch of government at this point, since it's basically doing the Fed's bidding for it to some extent now.
Right. Well, and you have the president, calling Larry Fink, it sounds like, pretty often to get his advice. All right, great to catch up with you, Joel Weber. It's a terrific story in the magazine. Check it out in the upcoming edition. It's already on the Bloomberg terminal and at Bloomberg.com. Carol?
All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. If you are listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week will continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business, it is coming up next. And coming up next, we're going to take a little bit more of a deeper dive into the bond market and also some of those comments from Jay Powell today. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio. Let's turn it on over to World and National News and Headlines. Let's head on over to Nancy Lyons.
I think we've got Nancy coming up in just a few minutes or just a few seconds. We are going to catch up with the CEO of Trivago, Axel Heifer, and also the CEO of Porsche North America. He's going to be along with us later on in the program. We're also going to talk about a book, Hustle and Float, Reclaim Your Creativity.
Business is like a puzzle.
Can you make a call?
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time? You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these
City.
and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup.
You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me. Max, you can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
World 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Tuesday. Stocks are fluctuating, but first, Visa CEO Al Kelly says he expects a majority of the firm's employees will continue working remotely through the end of the year. The San Francisco-based firm joins rival American Express in making the prediction for its workforce of 20,000 people. Visa, the world's largest payments network, owns or leases 131 offices in 76 countries, according to regulatory filings. Shares down by about 0.6%. The U.S. Labor Department says it will permanently end the practice of giving news media early looks at market-moving economic data after suspending the briefings during the coronavirus pandemic. Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner William Beach said in a letter emailed to news organizations, quote, continuing security, resource, and equity concerns outweigh, quote, any benefits of the press lockup process. The chairman of the Federal Reserve says the central bank has America's back as Congress argues over more emergency aid to overcome the pandemic. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell reassured the nation that the central bank will use all its financial tools to help the economy endure. Republicans and Democrats are arguing over additional fiscal stimulus after Congress passed a record $3 trillion rescue. In testimony to the Senate Banking Committee, Powell signaled now isn't the time to worry about debt. He said high unemployment can weigh on the economy for years. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Technology shares are pushing the NASDAQ Composite Index higher for a fourth day, while the broader U.S. equity equity market struggles to push higher. Right now, the S&P is down 6, has been fluctuating, down by about 0.2%. Dow Industrials down 173, down 0.7%. NASDAQ up 31. That is a gain of about 0.4%. United Airlines and Southwest are reporting modest gains in demand among some of the airline names today. Right now, we have got UAL up 0.6%, Southwest up 4.9%. American is trading unchanged. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's do a little Business Week economics here. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor, back at HQ. Eager to hear how that's all going. She's in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. I miss our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Carol Masser. Carl Riccadonna, also with us, Chief U.S. Economist for Bloomberg Economics. He's on the phone in New Jersey. So, KH, I want to start with you. I'm guessing you have been watching Chair Powell and Secretary Mnuchin very closely, as we have. What's your big takeaway so far? Because the market, at least on the equity side, is like, all right.
Well, you know, the backdrop for this, of course, is that the Democrats and the Republicans are, they're battling over whether or not more stimulus will be needed now, right away, how much or not. So that's the backdrop. And I think for both Chair Powell and Secretary Mnuchin, they went into this knowing that for Mnuchin, for example, the Democrats would beat him up like crazy, and for Powell knowing that they would push him hard to say clearly, yeah, I'm with you guys. Let's do more stimulus now. And Chair Powell predictably, I think, slipped into the typical Fed chair pattern that you kind of have to, which is to say, yes, I think there could be more stimulus, but he said, I'm speaking generally. In other words, it's up to you guys to do this, and you guys decide what that should be. And I think Mnuchin predictably said, well, look, we've done lots of things. Yes, there's been some problems. And I think he was much more wanted to be focused on all the things they've done that are falling into place. So long and the short of it, I don't know if these testimonies did much more than reassure people, certainly from the Fed, that they're saying he's still willing to do more if needed. And I think even Chair Powell isn't ready to say today, yes, we're going to do more, because they've got 4 more out of 9 programs to launch, et cetera, et cetera. They have to see the impact they have. But again, I think we pretty much figured this is the kind of day we're getting. I thought it was interesting, but I don't think it told us anything particularly new.
Anything new, Carl Riccadonna?
Well, I think that the new angle here is how much pressure there's going to be on fiscal stimulus. The amazing amount of fiscal stimulus that we delivered in the current quarter really is just enough to get us through that quarter. And so if we're looking at an economy that still is significantly impaired as we head into the second half of the year, and most likely that's going to be the case, we'll probably have an unemployment rate at about 18% as we turn into the back half of the year, then more support is definitely going to be needed. And that's a fiscal story that Congress and the administration have to deal with. It also will likely mean that the Fed has to do more as well. And a slew of Fed speakers from the chair on down have made it abundantly clear that policymakers are not in a neutral setting at the moment. They are definitely looking to lean in and do more. They're just figuring out the best way to deliver that accommodation.
Well, you can just throw in something really quickly. I think the question is, but if we're going to do more, what more are we going to do? Who was it who said recently, let's put the money directly into people's pockets, right? Let's go just give more money to people who can't get work, who are out of work, who are, whatever. And I think that's why this gets so complicated, because there are many industries, there's many businesses, there's many kinds of people who have been hurt by this. And I think what some people would like to see, which is, you remember when we criticized Bernanke back during the crisis and Yellen of the financial crisis, too many programs that whole idea, maybe just have a helicopter that drops money on people's front lawns, right? I think that's part of the issue here. If we're going to spend more money, who is it going to support? How is it going to support them?
But it struck me that the money to small business, that we're still Main Street, right? That program, we're still waiting for that to kick in. And that to me seems, Carl, so important to this economy.
Absolutely. So I'm all for Kathleen's advocacy of providing unemployment support. Maybe not literal helicopters.
Oh, I thought you were supporting the helicopter.
But you'd stay socially distanced from a helicopter, Carl. So
that helicopter can land in my front yard, by the way. But unemployment insurance is really one of the most critical tools for delivering funds and filling the void where it's most acute during this crisis. However, we also have to think of the business side, the supply side of the occasion of the equation, because if we're not supporting those businesses, there won't be jobs to go back to when the lockdown is released. And so we really have to provide support on both sides. But the main danger is, and we highlighted this from the very start, to be too clever in delivery. And we saw that with the small business program. We also see that with the Main Street lending program, that if things are overly engineered and overly elegant, often they're not as effective as just a blunt force solution to the problem. So you really try multiple different things, but make sure the cash is getting where it needs to go.
And Carl, are the data showing us in any sense at this point, like sort of what's working and what's not? When will we see that?
Well, I think most importantly to watch for what's working are measures like, well, first of all, financial markets are a great sentiment indicator. So the fact that financial markets have come back to a meaningful degree tells you that maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel for the crisis. The other thing to keep an eye on are other sentiment gauges like consumer confidence or small business sentiment, home builder sentiment, and those are starting to at least show a floor, if not some signs of recovery. But most critically will be the labor market metrics, because we need to get through the worst of this spike in unemployment to see that the economy is starting to move on to a more even keel.
So maybe we also need a virus confidence or lack of confidence index, because so many people say over and over and over until people are confident, until there's going to be a vaccine. Well, I don't think we can wait for a vaccine necessarily, because they usually take a lot longer. But I think this whole sense of when does the tide turn enough? When are there enough treatments maybe? Those can be developed a lot more quickly, where people are more willing to say, yeah, I know a lot of people. I have a friend who works for the airlines. She went back to work for her airline a couple of weeks ago. There are people who are going out there. There are people who would love to shop. There are people who are scared, and they maybe should be, that they won't go near this for the long time. Carl, do you think you could get something like that started? Virus confidence index?
Let me see what I can do. But importantly, we can measure that confidence in a lot of other series, like the ones I mentioned, for instance, business gauges, financial market performance. So, of course, if we had a confidence metric of people's attitudes towards COVID-19 and whatnot, that would be useful. But it shows up indirectly through a lot of other economic gauges.
All right, Carl Riccadonna, Kathleen Hayes, thank you both so much. Good breakdown from what we're hearing. Continue to hear a lot from Fed Chair Jay Powell. Let's get down to D.C. now. Nancy Lyons is there with World and National Headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. Well, as you've been hearing here on Bloomberg, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and Federal Reserve Chairman Powell worked today to assure the Senate Banking Committee they're carrying out the provisions of the financial aid bills expeditiously. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
Democrats pointed out that the riskiest jobs are held by the lowest wage workers, who also have the highest unemployment rate. Senator Sherrod Brown addressed Secretary Mnuchin.
How many workers will die if we send people back to work without the protections they need?
Mr. Senator, we don't intend to send anybody back to work without the protections. And I assure you, I couldn't be more proud of the medical advice that we're getting and the way the economy is opening up in a safe way.
Mnuchin also said small business lending has been reformed to reach only qualified small businesses. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, President Trump is threatening to withdraw altogether from the World Health Organization, a move that could rattle the global fight against the pandemic and could bolster Chinese leader Xi Jinping's position within the international body. President Trump addressed the issue today with reporters.
They have to clean up their act. They have to do a better job. They have to be much more fair to other countries, including the United States, or we're not going to be involved with them anymore. We'll do it a separate way.
Washington suspended payments to the WHO last month. An international team of scientists is out with a new report that indicates the global lockdown has resulted in an extreme reduction in daily carbon emissions. They're down by 17%. The last time levels were that low was back in 2006. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Nancy, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, Carol Massar, probably the favorite boss on Wall Street this week is Mike Corbat, because unlike just about everybody else, every other boss, he's saying, you know what, guys, take a day off.
Let's see if he's going to be the first of many, because I think it's wild. And you know what? It mirrors something. David Weston talked with Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan, and he was talking about a question about, when do we get back to work? He's like, we've always been working.
Yeah,
it's just
I
a
saw
case of getting back to office.
You tweeted that earlier. That was good.
Well, because I thought it was really clever. And I think, we've been having these conversations about, I don't know, I think initially I thought, well, it's going to be a little bit easier at home. And I feel like I'm working as hard as ever, which I'm not complaining, but it's testimony to kind of how well systems work in a virtual world and how you can do a lot at home. So Michael Corbat, though, saying, all right, everybody, take off Friday, as you said, after working, quote, harder than ever because of the coronavirus pandemic. He put this memo out to his staff, and it's, I think, really important that CEOs are acknowledging that people are at home, they're juggling families, they're juggling kids who are at school, and they're actually acting as teachers. There's a lot going on, and maybe it gives a much more holistic view of what's in someone's life, and just thinking about it a little bit differently, thinking about their employees perhaps differently.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. I think we're all learning a lot about what we work on, how we work, when we work. And I think for many people, the answer is all the time. And there are no boundaries. And with fewer boundaries, I think it's easy to get caught up in all of this. So let's go to the East Room now. The president holding a cabinet meeting there. Let's listen in.
Never happened to the world. It's a disgrace. Could have been stopped at the source, but they decided not to do that. But we're going to safely reopen our country and our economy, and it's happening very rapidly. And it's happening, interestingly, when numbers are actually going down. You look at Florida, the state of Florida, did a great job. You look at Georgia, you look at others, they're open. And some are doing extremely well, far beyond what people thought. And the numbers are going down. The numbers that we have been talking about for the last 2 months, they're actually going down. So it's really terrific. In our drive to crush the virus, the U.S. has completed nearly 12 million tests. And that number today is almost 14 million. Nobody's close. Germany would be second with approximately 10 million less than us, and we also have the best tests. South Korea is doing very well, but we're at 14 million, and they're at numbers that are very small by comparison. What has been done with testing, what's been done with ventilators, what's been done with the distribution of product has been incredible. We've made a lot of governors look very good. We've actually made all of the governors look very good. Some have done a good job, but we've made them all look very good. We got them equipment, and we got them their gowns and their ventilators and their tests like nobody would have thought possible. Vaccines are moving quickly into phase 1 and phase 2 trials, and trials of dozens of therapies and cures are underway, and we're making tremendous strides with therapies, cures, and vaccines. I think we're way ahead of schedule. And you probably heard logistically, we have our military engaged. And as soon as we have whatever it is that we're going to have, whether it's therapeutic or vaccine, it will be distributed very rapidly. Our military is ready to go. They can deploy hundreds of thousands of men and women a day. And now what they're going to be doing is they're going to be doing the vaccine, which we are geared up for even before we have it. But the chances of us having it are extraordinary. Secretary Azar will update us on all that we're doing to safeguard Americans. We'll be talking in a second. To protect our people and defeat the virus, we must also defend the health of our nation's economy. Secretary Mnuchin will report on the economic recovery efforts and the good numbers that are being produced ahead of schedule. Secretary Carson will update us on the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council. And Ben, you've done a fantastic job. We appreciate it. He's looked at HUD much differently than people that would have been in the pure real estate business. And he has a way of seeing things that's different and really good for our country. And Ben's working on very hard different plans to restore health and prosperity to disadvantaged and minority communities, and that's really working out well. One of the things we're very proud of is opportunity zones. Tim Scott of South Carolina came to me with a proposal, and few people understand how successful the opportunity zones have been. It's a great tribute to Tim and to others in the Senate that helped us with that. The pandemic has shown once again the vital importance of economic independence and bringing supply chains back from China and other countries. I probably got elected. One of the primary reasons was that. Make America great again, America first, call it whatever you want. But we went way out of bounds. We build a car and we go to 12 countries to build a car. I want to build a car from one country. We make the parts. To achieve this goal, we've slashed red tape and bureaucracy and unleashed the largest industrial mobilization since World War II, especially when it comes to big things like a ventilator. It's a very big, clumsy, highly sophisticated product. And we have now assembly lines. We're the talk of the world. We're supplying them to other countries. We're helping other countries that are going through this plague, and they're never going to be able to do ventilators. So it's really been an incredible thing what's happened. It's the biggest mobilization since World War II. And we're fighting for the livelihoods of American workers, and we must continue to cut through every piece of red tape that stands in our way. And that's why this is such an exciting meeting, beyond being a cabinet meeting, which is always good. Because with millions of Americans forced out of work by the virus, it's more important than ever to remove burdens that destroy American jobs. In a few minutes, I will sign an executive order instructing federal agencies to use any and all authority to waive, suspend, and eliminate unnecessary regulations that impede economic recovery. And we want to leave it that way. We want to leave it that way. In some cases, we won't be able to, but in other cases, we will. And you've heard me say many times, I've said it very strongly, that regulations, we've done more regulation cutting than any president in history, whether they're there for 4 years, 8 years, or in one case more. We've done more regulation cutting. I don't mean just in a year or 2 years. I mean, in the 3.5 years that we've been here, we've cut far more regulations by a factor of a lot than any other administration, any other presidency. So that's really something. I'm directing agencies to review the hundreds of regulations we've already suspended in response to the virus and make these suspensions permanent where possible. I'm also instructing agencies to use the emergency authorities to speed up regulation cuts or new rules that will create jobs and prosperity and get rid of unnecessary rules and regulations. We had cases where it would take 20 years to build a highway. You'd have to go through various agencies to get the same permit. I lived with it in the private sector, so I know it better than anybody. Where you go years and years and years to build a simple roadway or a simple building, and it would end up costing an absolute fortune, many, many times what it should cost. And it would take years before you could even seek final approval. 5 years, 7 years. 20 years, 21 years, a certain highway built recently, a small highway. I would call it a road. 21 years to get it approved. And then by the time they get it approved, it costs 100 times more in some numbers that you wouldn't even believe. We're getting rid of all of that. We're down now on roads, working with Elaine and Department of Transportation. We're down to a 2-year period. We want to see if we can do better. We have roads in there for 18, 17, 20, 21 years over the years. I'm not blaming Elaine for that. I'm just saying over the years there have been roads that have gone through a process for many years, roads and highways. So we're going to be getting it down to a year. And maybe it's not going to get passed for environmental reasons or safety reasons, but we're going to know quickly. But if it does pass, it's going to happen fast. Acting OMB director, soon to be permanent director. Where's Russ? Did you hear what I said? Soon to be permanent director. Okay, that's a big statement. Some people would say that's big news. He's done a fantastic job. So congratulations. Well, we have to get him to approve, but we'll give you a congratulations just prior to approval, right? So you're doing great. Thank you very much. So acting OMB director Russ Vought, will present details on this effort, and we'll go into that. So Russ has done a great job on exactly what he used to come into my office and say, I think we can cut a lot of different things in terms of regulation. And Russ, I think also very importantly, we'll have a better product. It's actually going to give us a better result. And we're adhering to the environmental impact studies and all of the other things we have to do to get these permits. So Russ Vought, thank you very much. I want to once again thank every member of the cabinet for your commitment to helping our nation reopen, to recover and rebuild. I'd like to now ask a man who's done a fantastic job as the head of the task force. He's worked literally 24 hours a day sometimes to make sure everything's gone well. Today we had a really great article by Rich Lowry who talked about the tremendous job that we've done in terms of the task force, in terms of the coronavirus and getting things going and getting people what they need, whether it's ventilators, testing, or many other things. And I appreciated that article very much because there's been a very false narrative. People have no idea what an incredible job the people in federal government have done, and that includes generals and admirals and lots of others. So I want to thank Mike Pence for the great job you've done, Mike, and please say a few words.
Mr. President, and I think everyone around this cabinet knows that from the first day of this administration, you've made it clear that you have no higher priority than the safety and security of the American people. In January, when you took the unprecedented action of suspending all travel from China, before there was a single case of community transmission in the United States, it is inarguable, Mr. President, that your decision bought us a critical amount of time to stand up a national response all across this country. At the same time, in January, you stood up the White House coronavirus task force, and over the course of February, you began to suspend more travel, establish screening at more than 11 airports around the United States, again with the priority of protecting the health and safety of the American people. And from the first day, Mr. President, that you asked me to lead the White House coronavirus task force, we have focused on the health of the American people. It would be on March 15th at your direction that we released the White House coronavirus guidelines for America. We asked a lot of the American people, and the American people responded. 15 days would become 45 days, and in that time, it was our objective, Mr. President, as you made clear, to save lives, to slow the spread, to flatten the curve. And because of what the American people did, because of the direction that you gave, and all of the dedicated members at HHS and FEMA and all of those around this table who served on the task force, because of the partnership that you forged with every governor of both political parties across the country, we've made great progress. That being said, Mr. President, I know that you believe, as we all do, that one life lost is too many. And we grieve today for the loss of more than 90,000 Americans to the coronavirus. But at a time like this, the first cabinet meeting that we have had since the advent of this epidemic, it's important to remember that when we asked the American people to make all of those sacrifices, the estimates before you were that if we did nothing, we could lose between 1 million and 2.2 million American lives. And in fact, even by taking the steps that we took, the estimates were still clear that even if we flattened the curve, that we could still lose 100,000 to 240,000 Americans. And so while we grieve the loss of those more than 90,000 Americans and their families are on our hearts today, we recognize the progress that we have made. Among the progress that we made, Mr. President, in flattening the curve and slowing the spread was preserving, as you directed, the capacity of our healthcare system. One of the great concerns that we had early on was that our healthcare system, our hospitals, would be overwhelmed by the coronavirus. That did not occur, Mr. President. Truth is, as you've reflected many times, because of the ingenuity of the American people, because of our partnership with states, because of a great logistics team that worked with the task force, no American who has needed a ventilator was ever denied a ventilator in the United States. It is an extraordinary accomplishment. And the report that I received today is that the national stockpile now has more than 15,000 ventilators. And because of the public-private partnerships that you've forged, we'll actually see American companies manufacture more than 110,000 ventilators in 100 days. Over 13 billion supplies and critical PPE were also delivered to doctors and nurses and first responders and to Americans on the front lines of this pandemic. And on the subject of testing, Mr. President, when you tapped me to lead this task force, we had fully done, under the old system of public labs, we had fully done only 8,400 coronavirus tests at the end of February. But as you just reflected, because of the public-private partnership that you formed with commercial labs across the country, we've now performed nearly 12 million coronavirus tests and more than 400,000 in a single day this past weekend. And Mr. President, as I'll share with the team, as we're increasing testing, the good news to Americans is, nevertheless, cases are going down. You reflected on that in your visit to the Capitol today and in your opening remarks. And in that, I hope, despite the heartbreak and the hardship that we have all endured, I hope the American people can sense that they've made progress. That as we continue to scale testing all across the country, our team with Admiral Giroir at the helm and FEMA at the helm estimates that we'll be able to conduct maybe 40 to 50 million tests a month by this September. But even as testing is expanding across the country, we're seeing cases coming down, and that's a tribute to the American people. But it's not just been the health of the American people that's been challenged, Mr. President. As you rightly observed, businesses large and small who have had to shutter their operations. We heard from restaurant owners earlier this week. And with the great work of our Secretary of the Treasury and your leadership, Mr. President, $188 billion in loans have been approved to small businesses. Nearly $583 million have been awarded through community health centers, all 50 states. We have been there at the point of the need for businesses large and small. We have been there for vulnerable populations. And at your direction, Mr. President, we'll continue to lean forward in that fight. The action that you're taking today with signing the executive order is going to make it even more possible for us to build this economy back again for the American people. And it was in that spirit that 1 month ago, Mr. President, as I close, you directed the White House Coronavirus Task Force to release guidelines to open up America again. And I'm proud to report to the Cabinet today that our best information is that all 50 states, as of today, are partially reopening their economies. And the American people are responding and breathing that free air again. They're doing it responsibly. They're enjoying the opportunity to be out in many states, to enjoy restaurants, businesses opening back up. The big three automakers went back to work this last Monday in Ben Carson's hometown of Detroit. And America is on its way back through a great, great season of hardship. It's a testament to the resilience of the American people. So, Mr. President, you charged the White House Coronavirus Task Force to have one mission, and that was save lives. To have one team, and that was to forge relationships all across the country. Because of your leadership, because of the great work of this cabinet, because of governors around the country, but mostly because of our incredible healthcare workers and the cooperation of the American people, we've slowed the spread, we flattened the curve, and we are reopening America. And Mr. President, I'm proud to report to you that we're on our way. And I promise you this entire team is going to continue to work with governors around the country at your direction until we bring the American economy all the way back, as you often say, bigger and better than ever before. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mike. And again, thank you very much for doing a great job. So I'm going to sign this now, and then Ben and Steve will speak, and then we'll go around the room a little bit, and we'll say what we want. I'd like to congratulate Rick Grinnell for doing such a fantastic job as acting. I don't think you want to be permanent, So I think you're very happy to be acting, but what a job. I think you'll go down as the all-time great acting ever at any position. So thank you very much, Rick. Thank you very much. Would you like to say something? Go ahead, please.
All right, you've been listening to President Trump, a cabinet meeting, as you can hear from the East Room of the White House. And I think one of the big headlines, of course, we heard from Vice President Mike Pence, but I think one of the big headlines was an executive order that's going to be signed that's rolling back more regulations. That's a big, broad statement, and I do wonder what will be the particulars in terms of what regulations will be rolled back. And so we'll look for some more reporting on that, because I think in terms of news value and what might impact our audience, that's important.
Yeah, that is important. What you heard was really the president and the vice president sort of framing the last few months and the response, and a lot of congratulations going around there. And we did hear from Secretary Mnuchin at length earlier today. So we'll bring you any headlines as they come.
Or go to Bloomberg.com, because we've got a great read-through of exactly what he said today before members of Congress. All right, we want to move on to our next segment, because, man, if Tom Keene doesn't know about this next guest in his company, we have to make sure he does. We're talking about Bow Ties of Vermont, which started out making bow ties years ago, now does a lot more, including making masks to protect against the virus. Transparency, I was doing research for this segment, and I went to the website. I bought some masks. Wow. Just going to tell you. This week in our Bloomberg Business Week Small Business Survival Guide, we welcome Greg Sugar. He's the owner of Bow Ties of Vermont. He joins us on the phone, though, from Florida, along with our Bloomberg News editor, Dimitra Casanidis. She's on the phone in New Jersey. Dimitra, let's start with you. Tell us how you were drawn to Greg and Bow Ties for your coverage.
Sure. Thanks, Carol. Well, I saw a post of his on LinkedIn, which is part of his story. I'd talked to Greg in the past and connected on LinkedIn because of one of his other businesses a few years ago, Thread Experiment. And I saw a post that said that he had masks and he was having a hard time finding people to buy the masks. This was in the first phase of his business's pivot, when they thought and tried to do PPE and bring in the actual, verified, safe, protective mask. So I chatted with Greg, I called him up, and we have spent a back and forth documenting his journey of the last 2 months that we'll be publishing on our Small Business Survival Guide tomorrow. But it's really an extraordinary journey that's about masks, but really about listen to your customers, respond when they say they want something, and really be prepared, to just kind of be very nimble and react quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, a big pivot here, Greg. So tell us about it, because one of the things it sounds like you did was think about your supply chain and your suppliers and your relationships in sort of a different way. Help us understand it.
Sure. Well, when everything was sort of happening and we heard about all these shortages going on at hospitals, I was wondering why there was a shortage. And my first instinct was, there must be a way to get this stuff in. And so I quickly contacted my contact in China, and someone I've been doing business with for 15 years. And I said, there's a mask shortage, a protective mask shortage here in America. Are you guys able to create something? And he said, yeah, there's a lot of businesses now sort of getting started in producing and manufacturing these protective masks. So he and I spent about 1 or 2 days together, literally traveling China. I was doing it through WeChat, and we reached out and we finally found a couple factories to do this. I reached out, I never cold called. It's not my style. I've been in e-commerce my whole life, but I cold called people I was reading about online or seeing even on TV and saying, we can get you some masks. Tell us what you need. And so I spent about the next 2 weeks hustling, spending every night on WeChat, speaking to my factory, hustling to get sales. And eventually I brought in hundreds of thousands of masks and got them to healthcare workers around the country. Even though my business is it's men's fashion. I sell ties and I sell shirts and I sell belts, pocket squares. But all of a sudden I saw an opportunity because, as you can imagine, there's not a lot of bow tie sales going on during this pandemic. So this, for me, was a way to stay above water, keep my workers busy, and really to make payroll.
What's been tough, though, about being a small business owner right now? Because we, Greg, talked to a lot of small business owners or those who work with them. I mean, this has been a really difficult environment. You sound like, obviously, you have found a way to survive here, but it's not necessarily been easy.
I mean, I think one of the biggest struggles has been this PPP program, because we've been required to, it's nice to have the money, don't get me wrong, but we've been required to spend that money in an 8-week period. And during an 8-week period, though, that really, at least in retail, not a lot's going on. You're seeing that in restaurants and some other businesses. So I'm paying some workers to sort of sit home and do nothing because we just don't have the business to do it. That sort of changed a little bit for us as we started getting into the cloth mask business. But still, I think the biggest struggle for a lot of small businesses is this requirement to spend this PPP money in 8 weeks and really pay workers not to do anything productive. It would be so much nicer if we had a lot more time to use that money to pay toward payroll instead of being forced to do it during this 8-week period while our economy is sort of getting back up and running again. We're not at full speed, and so I can't keep my workers busy all the time right now.
And so, Greg, what do you think, what does this portend for your business longer term, given everything that you just laid out? You've been opportunistic, clearly, but it sounds like there still are some fairly significant financial strains here, especially when you think about sort of the midterm prospects.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. I mean, we did a really, really quick pivot into cloth masks, so the stuff that we all wear day to day. So now I'm not talking about healthcare workers anymore. Yeah. I'm just talking about people like you and I. And we very quickly got into that. We had some customers reach out and say, can you make some masks? I think the belief that we were in the textile business, it would be sort of a natural thing for us. We also had been making, our seamstresses were making masks for healthcare workers, fabric masks. This is back in March where they were wearing bandanas to the hospital if they had to. And so we sent an email around. They said, why don't you make them for your customers? So we quickly changed that. So now, I mean, in the short term, to answer your question, like the next 3 to 6 months, I mean, we still sell some bow ties and neckties and shirts every day, but it's just, we're probably down 70 to 80% from last year in that world. So the mask business is really what's kind of keeping us alive and keeping us afloat. So I'm going to ride this wave. I'm trying to own the market. We offer 70 styles right now. There's no other business that offers so many. I've got another 35 coming next week and another 40 after the week after that.
I'm just going to say, because when I went on the website, man, so many were sold out. So you definitely are, tapping into something. Dimitra, just going to save the last 30 seconds here for you. When you talk to small businesses, what are you hearing? Is it a lot of folks that are figuring a way around this or a lot who are struggling?
It's both. I mean, it's businesses like Greg's where there might be a type of manufacturing that enables them to figure a way around, but it's still not recouping the kind of business that they were making pre-crisis. And others are struggling a little bit more if they weren't necessarily in a certain kind of business that could easily, be adjusted in a way that could either make masks or create a different form of, whatever you're producing and delivering it to customers. So it's so mixed, but the PPP point he made and the limitation on that is something that we have heard across the board as being more constraining, actually, in a way than completely opening you up and making you feel like you're okay.
And we've heard this a lot, some of these programs, right, that they're just kind of made so complicated and that they're, as a result, not reaching people quickly. I mean, that this whole idea of these Main Street loan programs haven't reached the people that it's set out to help.
Yeah, that was really a key part of the testimony this morning, I think. Yeah, great.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Hey, guys, thank you so much. Dimitra, thank you. Dimitra Kesanidis, she's a Bloomberg News editor on the phone in New Jersey. Greg Sugar, good luck with everything. Owner of Bow Ties of Vermont on the phone in Florida. Bow Ties. It's really cute. It's really cute. You'll like it. I don't know if you checked it out.
I will check it out for sure, and everybody needs masks these days. All right, let's get down to Washington. Nancy Lyons is there with some world and national headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin today warned senators of long-term economic damage if the economy remains shut down due to coronavirus pandemic. It was a declaration that was met with resistance from Ohio Democrat Senator Sherrod Brown.
How many workers should give their lives to increase the GDP or the Dow Jones by 1,000 points?
Workers should give their lives to do that, Mr. Senator, and I think your characterization is unfair. We have provided enormous amounts of equipment. We've worked with the governors. We've done a terrific job of getting...
Mr. Secretary, I'm not going to let you make a political speech about what a great job. We hear that from the president in his news conferences.
Mnuchin and Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell faced questions from the Senate Banking Committee on how they're implementing the $2.2 trillion relief package. Powell says the Main Street program to lend billions to small and mid-sized businesses should be ready to launch by the end of the month. The medical community continues to express concerns over President Trump's announcement he's taking hydroxychloroquine to prevent COVID-19. The drug has shown serious side effects, including heart problems, even death. Bharat Pankania is a clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter and is among those questioning the move.
He's absolutely wrong, and I'm very disappointed to also see the letter written by his own physician, where the letter says, on balance, there is no harm in taking it, or words to that effect.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told CNN she would rather the president not be taking something that has not been approved by scientists, citing his age and calling the president morbidly obese. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. Now let's get a business flash from Charlie Pellet.
All right. Thank you very much, Nancy. Here's what's going on. We've got 18 minutes to go ahead of the close. Stocks falling for the first time in 4 sessions after reports circulated that Moderna's vaccine study, which was credited in part for yesterday's rally, didn't produce enough critical data to assess its success. Moderna shares are down now by 9.5%. Yesterday, of course, they surged, but today we're seeing those gains give up at least part of the gains. The Dow, the S&P, they are both lower. NASDAQ is higher. NASDAQ up 22 points right now, higher by 0.2%. S&P down 13, lower by 0.5%. The Dow is down 239, lower by 1%. 10-year yield 0.70%. We've got gold up 0.8%, 17.46 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.1%, 32.50 a barrel. And now it's time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report.
Curbside pickup has started for retailers in New Jersey. A lot of stores with online ordering have already been doing it for months, but not smaller stores like Eat Your Spinach in Ridgewood, New Jersey. This is a boutique for kids' clothing. It's been shut down for 2 months. Anna Agnagnos owns the store. And Anna, your business came to a full stop when the stay-at-home order was announced. Is that right?
The moment we could not have an open store, that's when everything stopped for me, meaning I'm not doing anything. And the landlords, I guess, are kind of just waiting to see what's happening. They haven't really told me anything yet.
New Jersey is transitioning with curbside pickup. Are you going to be impacted, or how are you going to pivot to that?
For me, honestly, I think that's a joke. I mean, if you are an online store, and you've been doing both online and in-store, curbside might help you because they're used to seeing things online and they could just zoom by and just put it in their trunk. But I don't think curbside means come in and shop.
It sounds like you don't have a lot of clarification on what New Jersey is transitioning to.
Right, for me, because I've seen people, other boutiques, thinking that the customers can come or we can go outside and show them things. You know, like instead of them coming in, you can go out and show them things on the sidewalk. I don't know.
Well, yeah, for small boutiques like yours where it's all about customer service and a personal touch, sounds like curbside pickup may not be the big boost you need. Best of luck, Anna. Anna Agnagnos, the owner of Eat Your Spinach, a kids' clothing store in Ridgewood, New Jersey. And we're going to continue bringing you stories of small business, how they're struggling and adapting in this climate every day at this time, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Small Business Report for today.
And we thank you, John. Again, recapping equities mixed right now. S&P close to the low of the day, down 16. The Dow down 261. For the Dow, that is a drop of 1.1%. S&P down 0.5%. NASDAQ holding on to a 7-point gain, now up by 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. Talking Heads will save us all, Carol Masser, as will Dave Wilson. Dave,
wow,
I'm just ready to hear
there something
the sultry sounds
subliminal
of your
in there?
voice.
The Talking Heads? I'm just wondering, Dave Wilson.
You know, if you want to hear it that way, it's fine.
You know what, Dave Wilson? I do want to hear it that way today.
Be my guest. I had something a little bit less subliminal in mind, you know.
Okay.
Take me to the river, wash me in the water. How much have we heard about liquidity in the past several months? And, you know, it's a topic that comes up with today's chart because it's based on an index that, frankly, I don't remember seeing before. When we think about comparing prices of stocks with different indicators, you know, you've got the price earnings ratio, you've got the price sales ratio, you've got the price to cash flow, the price to EBITDA, it goes on and on. Now you have the price to liquidity ratio. It's something that Michael Darda, who's the chief economist and market strategist at MCAM Partners, cited in a report late last week. And what he did was take the value of the S&P 500 index and compare it with the broadest measure of the U.S. money supply. It's something called money of zero maturity, or MZM. It includes cash on hand, checking accounts, savings accounts, money market funds, anything that could become cash at a moment's notice or be used to pay the bills, in essence. And when you run the numbers going back to 1990 on the Bloomberg terminal, he went back a whole lot further than that, but the chart focuses in on the last 3 decades, you find out that the ratio has averaged 0.18. These days, it's at 0.14, so it's actually lower than average, even with the rebound that we've seen in stocks the last couple of months. So, you know, that's the takeaway. The way that Darda sees it, you know, there's more room for stocks to go up than to go down based on this indicator. So, you know, it's something that got my attention, and now it can get your attention too. If you haven't seen this already, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
All right, Dave Wilson.
Dave Wilson.
Jinx.
Dave Wilson and I were having a nice little Twitter back and forth because I sent the Rolling Stone list of the top debut singles as ranked.
Okay.
You know what number 1 was?
No, what?
Britney Spears. One more time. Hit
No
me, maybe one more time.
way.
Yeah.
Well, this is bizarro world.
The Beatles, Dave was not happy, came in at number 21. Do you know what their first single was?
What?
Do you know what their first single was?
No.
Love Me Do. I didn't either. I read it.
Dave Wilson, do you even own any Britney Spears?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
But I will tell you, if you're talking about Britney, one of these days you should hear Richard Thompson's cover of "Oops, I Did It Again."
Oh,
it's fabulous.
I'm going to Google that.
You gotta bring that on the show. Will you do that? Okay. All right. Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We'll talk with you just a few minutes after the close of trading for your stock of the day. This is Bloomberg.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, it is time for the drive to the close. We've had an interesting market day. Investors, to some extent, maybe listening to Jay Powell and Stephen Mnuchin up on Capitol Hill. I think we're just kind of in this interesting environment. Let's see what Mark Lucchini has to say. He's Chief Investment Strategist at Janney Montgomery Scott, joining us on the phone from Pittsburgh. And as we bring him in, I do want to point out that equities at their lows of the day, Dow down almost 1.2%, pretty flat on the NASDAQ, and just down about 0.7% on the S&P, of course, coming after one day where we saw a broad-based rally that sent stocks significantly higher. So, Mark, nice to have you here with Jason and myself. You're in charge of setting your firm's view on macroeconomics, as well as the equity market and the fixed income market. How do you see it right now?
Well, good afternoon. Yes, thank you for having me on. Well, we've taken the position that it's certainly time to be parsimoniously allocating risk-based capital to the equity markets. And by that we mean
taking a constructive but cautious approach, because what we've seen here is a pretty massive rally, which, including the news yesterday from Moderna, is baking in and pulling forward a lot of hope and expectation that the accompanying economic recovery is going to represent the same V shape that we've seen out of equity prices. And of course, the vaccine is clearly the game changer, but as we're finding out today, perhaps investors were a little bit premature in expecting that what we saw in terms of a somewhat preliminary release around the trial efficacy that was shown from the vaccine from Moderna may have a little more work to do to prove ultimately to be the solution that we need to be able to restore normal life in the U.S. and, for that matter, around the world.
So eyes on vaccines, eyes on Capitol Hill, but also eyes on some big earnings this week, Mark, especially when we look at some of the retailers that came out today, Home Depot and Walmart and Kohl's most notably. What did you read into that? Any surprises or any indicators there that might give us a sense of what's going on in the real world?
Again, I think it continues to be a function of the winners and the losers. I mean, one can generalize about the retailing space and say, well, it's not a place I want to invest capital. But in fact, it's much more nuanced than that. You have the hypermarkets, if you will, like the Walmarts and the Costco's and even the Targets that you would put in that category that have very effectively competed in this environment for consumer spending, particularly as it relates to general household items, consumer staples, if you will. And also, what's common among these franchises is the fact that they've been very good at adopting an e-commerce initiative that escalated rather quickly some years ago, and has not only helped them in times like this when we've been obviously shopping from our homes and regional or city-specific locales, but in addition to that, compete very effectively against Amazon. Unfortunately, as some of the others that have been saddled with brick-and-mortar debt that have been obviously victimized by the low traffic in the malls and some of the strip plazas and so on, like the Kohl's and the JCPenney's, that are going to struggle in the case of those that remain open and struggle to come back from bankruptcy that's been declared, like in the case of JCPenney.
Hey, Mark, I'm curious what you're hearing, and even maybe internally within your company, how you guys, you're in a very senior position at your company, what you guys foresee will be your responsibility to some of the big problems that are being really revealed during this crisis. Not new problems, right? Whether it's inequalities, whether it's people, Jay Powell coming out and talking about, the percentage of people making $40,000 a year who are out of work right now, just struggling to get by. Jamie Dimon coming out today saying he hopes policymakers use the virus crisis as a wake-up call to address some of those inequalities that are among Americans. What are the conversations you're having internally about the role of your firm going forward, and also what you anticipate will be the priorities of companies going forward? Will it be just about existence and making sure shareholders are happy, or will people think about the broader good even at the expense of maybe earnings per share?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And yes, while I do hold a senior position, much of that kind of discussion and policy is a little bit away from my jurisdiction as the chief investment strategist. Having said that, I think a couple of things that we've seen. I think there's already been, if you will, not necessarily due to Janney or is going on in Janney, but actually preceded this, and that's really a secular shift away from capitalism, if you will, in a sense of away from managing for only shareholder or stakeholder value and really expanding that cohort to consider labor. Much more strongly. And in fact, we've seen, if you will, more capital by way of increasing in wages and so on, benefits and whatever, job security being transferred to labor. Now, this is a phenomenon that's going to take many, many years to develop to catch up to look anything like we saw, for instance, back in the 1960s. But nonetheless, at least directionally, this has been a secular change that's actually been underway now for some time. But I think also Janney's in a somewhat unique position in that we're a privately held enterprise. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Penn Mutual. And therefore, I think our firm's management team can think differently about the decisions that they're making that are not catering to quarter-over-quarter public scrutiny and earnings announcements, but rather which benefit the strategic initiative of the firm over an extended period of time, which includes diversity measures, which we've adopted and undertaken quite aggressively in the firm to make sure that we're providing the kind of access to individuals and again, cohorts of all various races, educational levels, and income needs as a way to participate, and a really good story and narrative around what Janney Montgomery Scott has offered to its clients. Right. But I think as a go forward, you can see it by way of ESG, the environmental, social, and government initiatives, which is a large and growing, if you will, franchise that is gathering massive amounts of money from asset managers, and they're pressing on companies to adopt more fully these policies.
Right. All right. Going to leave it on that note. Mark, appreciate your thoughts on that. Mark Lucchini, he's Chief Investment Strategist at Janney Montgomery Scott, joining us on the phone from Pittsburgh. Stick around, folks. Just about 3 minutes left in today's trading day. We'll drive you to the close right here on this Tuesday.
Bloomberg Daybreak 8.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just took over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we wrap up trading on this Tuesday. Folks from Magellan Mainstream Partners virtually ringing that closing bell. Let's begin with a couple of headlines from the Bloomberg Professional Service. First of all, U.S. virus cases rise 1.6%. Matching the past week's daily average, and former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is asking an appeals court to intervene as a judge weighs dismissal. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all declining today. A lot of those losses coming in the final few minutes of trading. Stocks fell for the first time in 4 sessions after reports circulated that Moderna's vaccine study, which was credited in part for yesterday's rally, did not produce enough critical data to assess its success. less. Today, Moderna shares, they dropped 10.4%. S&P lower by 31, a decline of 1%. The Dow down 390 points, down 1.6%. NASDAQ down 49, a drop there of 0.5%. And to be clear, a lot of the losses really came in the final few minutes of trading. 10-year up 11/32 with the yield 0.68%. Gold up 0.8%, 17.46 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up today by 2.1%. So it turned out to be a down day. Mark Lashini is chief investment strategist at Janney Montgomery Scott. He was our guest moments ago right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
The vaccine is clearly the game changer, but as we're finding out today, perhaps investors were a little bit premature in expecting that what we saw in terms of a somewhat preliminary release around the trial efficacy that was shown from the vaccine from Moderna may have a little more work to do to prove ultimately to be the solution that we need to be able to restore normal life in the U.S. and, for that matter, around the world.
And again, Moderna shares lower today by 10.4%. Recapping, a move lower for U.S. equities, S&P down 31, a drop of 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Your next move will be your last.
Nobody move a muscle.
Damn, Sippy, you got some moves.
And I'm moving from town to town.
Time is money. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, so let's take a deep dive into the markets. You heard Charlie breaking down those numbers and talk about selling into the close, often a negative sign, so we don't necessarily want to see that. If I take a look at the S&P 500, 402 names in the index, Jason, were lower today, 102 higher, 1 unchanged. So you can see that it was fairly broad-based in terms of the selling today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, as Charlie said, did take a leg down after those headlines about Moderna. That stock, really down today after really driving the entire market yesterday in many ways.
Well, I have to say, the stock was down 10%, more than 10% in today's session. That's after gaining more than 20%. What's interesting is, and listen, we put out words of caution yesterday, but what happened is the company apparently withheld some key information about the vaccine. And a publication cited the lack of NIAID, we're talking about National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, a press release and some missing information that needed to interpret the data. So Moderna telling staff that additional data will be disclosed at a later date, but nonetheless, again, a caveat, and that's why we need to be very careful about getting too ahead of ourselves when it comes to a vaccine.
Well, and we did hear from some retailers. We were talking with our Drive to Close guest about that, Mark Lashini. And Home Depot, disappointing investors. That stock down about 3%, closing down about $7.25. Kohl's as well coming out. That stock was down as well, about 7.7%. And Walmart as well. That's another one that actually was doing better during that time. It's down about 2%.
All right, that's a look at movers and shakers, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up. Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door. It's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson, Dave Wilson back with us. Tell us about your stock.
Dycom Industries, Jason. They build phone and cable networks. The company was founded in 1969, went public in 1984. The ticker is DY. Now, the company's shares reached a record in February 2018 after more than quadrupling in 3.5 years. They later gave back all the gain and then some, and in March, they fell to the lowest price since 2012. Dycom has rebounded since then, and the rally gained momentum after first quarter results came out today. The company had unexpected profit for the fiscal period. Revenue beat analysts' average estimate in a Bloomberg survey, even though sales fell to its biggest customers, Verizon, AT&T, CenturyLink, Comcast, Windstream. And in response to all this, Dycom shares climbed to their highest price since February. They're up as much as 25% at one point, closed with a gain of 14%.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser here with you on a Tuesday afternoon. Lemon, it is Tuesday.
It is Tuesday, and so much has already happened. I think about the Moderna news, the enthusiasm yesterday, reality check, which we like to say a lot, happening certainly in today's session. We've heard it from many of the medical experts that we've had on our air that a vaccine, it takes a long time. Even if you're rushing it, it still has to go through those normal procedures. And then I feel like, just think about the last week, how many times we've heard from Jay Powell, the Fed chief, including today. We'll get some more this week, but, really saying, listen, yes, the Fed hasn't run out of tools. There's a lot more than we can do, but there are certain requirements or parameters in terms of what they can do, and now it's up to policymakers. We do have more, though, on the Fed, and for that, we want to turn things over to Bloomberg News International Economics and Policy correspondent Mike McKee, talking with Fed Reserve Bank Boston President Eric Rosengren.
Some conditions for reopening yesterday. As we get there, what do you see happening in your district, in Boston, in Massachusetts, and the other states of the district? What are people telling you about how fast they think you'll get to reopen?
Well, it's wonderful news that we're getting to the place where we can start talking about reopening. But I would highlight that's only the first step that we need to take. Consumers have to be comfortable actually going to businesses and buying stores, going to restaurants. Employees have to feel comfortable going on the subway, the train, or a bus. And with community spread still continuing in Massachusetts, I think we are a little ways away from that point. So as important as it is to take the first steps to open up businesses or allow businesses to open up, I think we should be cognizant of the fact that many people, particularly older Americans, are going to be very leery of going into restaurants, going on to mass transit, or going on to planes until the public health problem is more resolved.
Well, what are CEOs of companies in your district, and even people who run mom and pop stores, telling you about their expectations for business, for the economy as you reopen?
I think they're very much hoping that there'll be a pickup in the second half of the year. I think in GDP terms, there will be a pickup. I also think, though, that unfortunately the labor markets are still going to be pretty weak. So in a talk I gave today, I highlighted that by the end of the year, I expect the unemployment rate to still be in double digits. So it's probably going to be significantly down from where we are right now. The unemployment rate was 14.7%. And many Americans that took that survey said they were employed but were not working the week of the survey. So the number's probably a little closer to 20%, and we'll see in the next couple months if it still goes up a little bit more. But I think by the end of the year, we're probably talking in the low double digits. That's still a very, very high unemployment rate. And what that reflects is the fact that I don't think many employees are going to want to go into some of the cities that are still having significant problems. And I think consumers are still waiting to feel more comfortable before they go into stores, before they go into restaurants.
Well, one of the things that's supposed to mitigate that somewhat is the new Main Street lending program, which your bank is in charge of. Chairman Powell said today it should be up and running by the end of May. What's the delay been?
Well, it's a very complicated program. Think of the need to get thousands of loans from thousands of different financial institutions. And so we have to set up all the IT and the networks to be able to do that. We also spent a lot of time putting the term sheets together. So the Federal Reserve is normally not in the business of lending to businesses. And so as a result, we wanted to get a term sheet that reflected the needs of both businesses and banks so that we would get sufficient volume to make it worth doing. We got comments from that. We had to hire vendors to do some of the activities. So these complicated facilities can take quite some time to open up. I would highlight that the money market liquidity facility that was also opened by the Boston Fed opened up in about a week. And the reason was because that was a much simpler program to do. It was dealing with market securities. Bank lending, by its very nature, is not really designed for someone like the Federal Reserve to come in and provide significant funding to existing loans or even to new loans, because bank loans are very particular to the borrower and lender. And across banks and across borrowers, you get very different terms in any kind of bank agreement.
Well, you mentioned volume, and there have been questions raised about whether the financial institutions want to participate as much as you might like them to because they're afraid of taking on bad loans. Also, we're quite a ways into this. Might it be a little too late to have a significant impact?
So I don't think it's going to be too late. I think this is actually a pretty good time for this facility to open up. The way we're doing the lending is we're using the financials from the end of the year when hopefully the business was doing well and the loan by the bank was viewed as a past loan. The kind of business we're looking for is one that was a perfectly good business that got badly disrupted by the pandemic and is now looking for bridge financing to get them to the point where the economy is doing much better. So I think this is a situation where we currently are at, that a lot of businesses have been badly disrupted. It's gone on longer than many businesses were already hoping. And as a result, there are a wide variety of businesses that I think may want to take advantage of this facility.
One of the other programs that's come under some criticism is the secondary market lending program because some critics say you're propping up zombie companies that really can't continue to survive unless they continue to borrow. And at some point, we're going to have a lot more defaults and bankruptcies. Do you see that happening in your district?
Well, with the Main Street program, we are definitely doing somewhat risky lending in that the borrowers we're providing financing for were borrowers that were in good shape at the end of the year, but are now facing difficulties as a result of the pandemic. So partly by design, these are going to be problem loans. And so what we're trying to do is get the right outcome for employment. And so if all these businesses end up failing, that would be a significant impact on employment. We want to avoid that outcome. That means we're taking a little bit more risk than we normally take in order to try to make sure that there's sufficient financing. I would highlight that during the financial crisis and in New England during the 1990 crisis, where it was a credit crunch crisis, one of the problems was that borrowers and households couldn't find financing. So we're trying to make sure that the lack of financing doesn't become a problem right now and make sure that what is hopefully temporary spells of unemployment actually stay temporary and people are able to be reemployed. But the longer that people are unemployed, the longer businesses have to finance themselves, the more risky it becomes for the economy overall.
Got less than a minute left. Let me quickly ask you, many companies have discovered the joys of working from home and maybe the savings working from home. Do you anticipate any problems in the commercial market?
I think commercial real estate is going to go through a major shift as a result of the pandemic. Clearly, office space is certainly one area. There are probably more warehouses than we needed before. And I do think that some multifamily housing in downtown areas may be more challenged as people rethink whether they want to be downtown or in suburbs. So I think we're in a period where real estate's going to be going through some pretty dramatic changes.
Any prediction on when the Red Sox season open?
I don't predict the Red Sox.
You've learned. All right. Thank you very much. Eric Rosengren is the president of the Boston Federal Reserve Bank. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll send it back to you.
All right. You've been listening to Michael McKee, Bloomberg News International Economics and Policy Correspondent, talking with Federal Reserve Bank of Boston President Eric Rosengren. And I think one of the key headlines there, talking specifically about a pickup in U.S. GDP in the second half of 2020, Jason. And I do think, we all know the numbers up until we start to see a pickup are going to be, gut-wrenching in terms of unemployment rates. But it is about what happens in the second half and what kind of a pickup do we have. And I think that's going to be really key.
Also echoing something that we've heard quite a bit of late, which is commercial real estate, in his words, to go through a major shift. All right, lot moving after the close of trading. Let's get those headlines with Charlie Pellet. Hey, Charlie.
Thank you very much. And here's what's going on. Stocks down for the first time in 4 sessions after reports circulated that Moderna's vaccine study, which was credited in part for yesterday's rally, didn't produce enough critical data to assess its success. Today, we have Moderna dropping by 10.4%. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all declining. A lot of that selling coming in the final few minutes of trading. NASDAQ NASDAQ had been higher for most of the day. It dropped 49 points, down 0.5%. S&P lower by 31, down 1%. The Dow dropped 390 points, down 1.6%. 10-year up 10/30 seconds with a yield of 0.69%. Gold up 0.8%, $17.46 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.1%, $32.50 the ounce. So again, recapping here, S&P and NASDAQ both turning negative in the last hour of trading. S&P ending the day with a loss of, we'll call it 31 points, down by 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Massar, along with my co-host Jason Kelly. And Jason, I have to say, I feel like we have gone through the virus crisis with our next guest.
Yes.
Kind of tracked it together. We talked with him in late February, then in late March, and now here we are in late May. With us right now is Axel Heifer, and I do wish the backdrop was different. He is the CEO of Trivago, of course, well entrenched in the travel industry and obviously seeing the impact firsthand. He joins us on the phone from Germany. Axel, nice to have you back with us. I do wish the backdrop was different, but I do wonder, first of all, I hope you're doing okay. How's everybody doing so far?
Everybody healthy. So, yeah.
It's tough.
So far, so good.
It's tough.
It is tough, yeah.
Well, talk to me, because we were with you just before kind of, I feel like everything went into a lockdown. We talked to you in late March when stuff was just kind of feeling like it was spiraling out of control. What's changed since we last talked in late March?
To be honest, everything. So from our perspective, pretty much everything. So really right after we spoke last time, there was this big cluster in Italy, and then within days, one market after the other disappeared. So traveling pretty much stopped within 2 to 3 weeks globally. And for us as a business, that was obviously a shock and very difficult to deal with in the beginning. But pretty soon, actually, we realized that travel will stop and has to stop. So we encouraged our travelers to stop traveling to help to contain the virus, and started to think about the future. And that's what we've been doing since then.
And so what does it look like? What does travel look like at this moment? Because we're starting to see little signs of life. I feel like the airlines are communicating a little bit more. Hotels are communicating a little more. People are putting plans in place for the comeback, but we don't see any real evidence yet. Help us understand what you're hearing from your network.
So what we do see actually on our side is that in certain regions, there are a few people starting to re-engage and think about traveling again. And the most common searches that we see, and still at a very low level, are basically from metropolitan areas into more remote areas. So getting out of the crowds, staying in a vacation rental or in an hotel or in a small hotel or in an apartment, and really increase the distance to others, but also get out of the lockdown situation where many people have been in their home for 8, 9, and 10 weeks, and some even a bit longer, and just want to get out there, get to the nature. And that's what you see right now. And in Europe in particular, there is more focus on a month from now, travel time a month from now. So basically securing some time outside of home for the summer break.
So people are starting to schedule for like a month from now. That's what you're seeing?
That's what we are seeing. There are very, very short travel times, so really tomorrow and the day after, where there is very high certainty that you can actually do very short trips to see families, etc. And then there is quite a bit of activity for a few weeks out, really to schedule for the summer break.
And Axel, I know we talked a little bit about this the last time you were with us, and I'm sure that it has evolved pretty dramatically. So how does that change your service? What do you do differently in terms of what you tell your customers, sort of what you tell the whole ecosystem that you're serving, and how?
So we made some quick fixes to our existing product, and our existing product is basically built on where you want to go, and then we help you to find the best time and the best place to stay. So there we added a lot more rates that offer free cancellation, which is currently very important to travelers. But the bigger change is not live yet. So we started pretty much 8 weeks ago, I'd say 9 weeks ago, to work on a different product that is basically helping you to find nice places to stay and also nice places to go within driving distance. So it's more a local traveling product where you can say, I'm in New York, but I want to go for a hike over the weekend. So what are places where I can go for a nice hike, and what are the nice stays that go with it? And that is, for us strategically, obviously, a bit more inspirational than our existing product, but we do think that it is very, very necessary to help travelers to get step-by-step comfortable with safe travel again.
Yeah, I do wonder. That's really interesting, and I've noticed that just even online with, travel sites that I'm involved in, that they've gone from, or they're creating more and more lists about, okay, here's, the top 10 destinations you can drive to, or, the top 10 destinations that are within a few hours of you. You're really seeing that. Is that, Axel, a necessary, as you said, a first step to kind of getting us back in, okay, wait, we can travel safely?
It is absolutely necessary. I mean, the way we are thinking about it is that, and every traveler is obviously slightly different, so I painted a bit black and white, but psychologically, we, all of us have been in a situation where we were trained that we should stay away from other people, that it is actually dangerous to be close to other people, and the situation is getting better in a lot of regions around the world, so what is important is that you do small steps to get out of your comfort zone and get comfortable with a bit further away from home and a bit further. So this aspect of traveling somewhere that is close by, something that might be very familiar to you, is from our perspective very important psychologically, not really to stretch yourself too far.
Axel, what are the conversations though you're having with places, even if you're driving to them, to say, listen, you've got to make sure that your facility is really safe and secure, because if there are any problems, how social media, things will just go through social media very quickly and people say it's not safe to go here or it's not safe to go there. So I am curious about what are the conversations that you're having with, some of the places, that I can go to your site and, sign up to stay at. What are those conversations?
So I think the complication is not that it is not safe to stay in accommodations, in hotels or in alternative accommodations from the large providers, because everybody is very concerned about the safety of the travelers. So there's a lot of effort put into exact cleaning standards, how many people can be where at which point in time, etc. From my perspective, the bigger challenge is that there are very different regulations by country, but sometimes even by state or region. So the transparency about what to expect is very, very, very difficult. So, for example, in Germany, the restrictions are lifted on a federal state level, but then in case of rising infections, they will be reimposed based on a city level. So you can have restaurants open in one city and they are closed in another city, and they are open but at a very limited occupancy in another city. So it is I think the accommodation is safe is a lower less of an issue, but it's more, what is my overall experience? Is it actually even worth going somewhere? That is where the transparency is missing, and that's something that we are working on and trying to help with.
That's a really good point.
Such an interesting point too, and it sort of speaks to this notion too that different people are going to go to different places with different expectations based on where they're coming from and what they're used to, and ultimately we're talking about human beings kind of moving around and interacting with each other in some form or fashion. All right, we're going to continue our conversation with Axel Hefer in just a few minutes. He is the CEO of Trivago, joining us on the phone from Germany. They reported earnings today. We're going to get a little bit more into the numbers and maybe have him help us imagine what travel looks like on the other side, sort of maybe a little mid to longer term, because I know you're reading the same things I am, and you look at things about airlines and whatnot and just think, maybe I'm good to stay here.
Yeah, I can hold off a little bit longer. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We'll continue talking about the travel industry in just a moment. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Investors turn back gains after reports the Moderna vaccine study may not be all it's cracked up to be. All three averages fell 0.5 to 1 0.6%. The Dow down 391 points. The Nasdaq 50, the S&P 31. The study had gotten credit for sending the Dow 900 points higher to start the week, but the reports say there isn't enough critical data in it to make any assessments. Moderna shares fell 10.5%. Walmart and Home Depot dragged too, losing 2 to 3%. Both companies saw stronger sales last quarter, but neither would say how they expect the full year to go. Facebook wants its own shopping empire, so it's offering a new version of a feature called Shops. It'll let retailers upload product catalogs to their Facebook or Instagram, and if you click on an ad, you'd get directed to a shop inside Facebook instead of the retailer's website. Eventually, this would be available on Messenger and WhatsApp, too, giving retailers access to Facebook's nearly 3 billion users. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. Staying alert means you must stay at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit contact with others. Keep your distance if you go out. And wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember, he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. You know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search The Right Time with Bomani Jones to listen.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
It'll be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm out sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe, keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Axel Heifer, the CEO of Trivago, all about where the travel industry is headed. Carol.
Yeah, looking forward to continuing our conversation. Let's get back, though, to your top business stories. Let's check in once again with Charlie Pellet.
All right. Thank you very much. Major headline just crossing on the Bloomberg. Johnson & Johnson discontinuing its legacy talc-based baby powder products in the U.S. and Canada after thousands of suits alleging asbestos contamination led to a decline in sales. After hours, J&J down now by about 2.5%, but the healthcare giant saying today it has stopped shipping hundreds of talc-based items in the U.S. and Canada after coming, quote, to a commercial decision to discontinuing them. So again, repeating the headline, Johnson & Johnson discontinuing talc baby powder in the United States and Canada. Stocks fell for the first time in 4 days. A lot of those losses coming really in the final few minutes of trading after reports circulated that Moderna's vaccine study, which was credited in part for Monday's rally, didn't produce enough critical data to assess its success. Today we saw Moderna shares dropping by just about 10%. S&P lower by 31, down 1%. Dow Industrials down 390, down 1.6%. Nasdaq down 49, a drop of 0.5%. 10-year up 9/30 seconds with a yield of 0.69%. Gold up $14 the ounce, higher by 0.8%, 17.46. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil up today by just about 0.9%, higher at $31.92 a barrel. Talking travel, among some of the travel names, UAL, parent of United, down 1.9% today. Southwest shares up 2.2%. Southwest saying it is seeing signs of increased bookings. American down 2.3%. Delta down 0.5%. Marriott dropping 3.1%. Hilton higher by 3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie. Thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, you just heard some of those travel names mentioned and a mixed picture for sure. Let's get back to our conversation with Axel Heifer, CEO of Trivago, joining us on the phone from Germany. Axel, help us sort of separate, if you will, the signal from the noise. Find the signal in the noise here in terms of what travel is going to look like in the short term. I feel like we're reading and hearing all the time sort of these very dramatic stories about what it's going to be like or what it is like to get on a plane and whatnot. What do you hear and what do you predict in the short and midterm?
Yeah, it's not that simple because it really depends on your state of mind as a traveler, and that is very different. Being very young, being older, feeling more unsafe and uncertain, or feeling overall safer. So it's difficult to generalize, but I would say if there is a general trend, what we see is that there is a lot more activity on really. As I mentioned earlier, on destinations where people are traveling from the metropolitan areas to the nature close by within driving distance. A lot more regional over than national travel and hardly any international travel. And I think that pattern will hold. And obviously that doesn't mean that there will be no international travel in a couple of weeks from now or in a couple of months from now. But relatively speaking, more people are comfortable with local and short travels and trips that they can control themselves and that just feel safer versus things that are further away from home, bigger crowds, further out. And it will differ really person by person, but those are the general trends.
So, Axel, how are you managing? I mean, you've got a global workforce. Have you been able to hold on to everybody? And I'm just curious, what the future looks like. Will you be able to hold on to everyone, or will it be contingent on what happens as things start to reopen?
So what we've done is we really followed a working backwards approach. So we spent really the first couple of weeks of the crisis to form a view and a hypothesis that we're working against what next year and the years to come will look like in terms of travel market, which players will be in the market, how much demand will be there, and then what does that mean for us as a business? How do we need to change our products? And then in the last step, what kind of organizational setup do we need and where do we need and how many people? And once we've done that, we announced end of last month restructuring, where we unfortunately had to let go quite a few of our colleagues, but by now have a setup where we feel very comfortable that we can master the challenges that are ahead of us.
And do you have any sense of what's sort of permanent here? I mean, in terms of changed behavior, it's hard to say, I know, and we know that this is a solvable medical problem, we hope, and that life will become somewhat more normal, but it feels like always in these crises, there's some things that, that do sort of stick with us in the long term because there will be, unfortunately, another incident of some form or fashion like this. Do you have a sense of how travel will fundamentally change?
So, we can only have an hypothesis there, but I think there are three things that make sense to me. The first one is the travel will not be perceived automatically as a given and as safe as it has been like 6 or 12 months ago. We have been in our apartments for now 10 plus weeks, and we have been trained over that time that we should stay away from other people, and we will continue to do so for quite some time, and that will have an effect on how comfortable we feel really being close to many other people and masses. And of course, that will normalize over time, but I think it will definitely have an effect even beyond the lockdown measures on our own psychology. The second point I think is related to that. Travel has really been almost a commodity before the crisis. You could go anywhere at any point in time, right, and that is not true anymore. So you cannot go anywhere, and you cannot go at any point in time. And even when you will be able to go again, it is less certain what exactly you can expect. And I mentioned it earlier. What is really your experience when you go now to Florida? You don't know. And that uncertainty, again, will take some time to get the comfort again that you know exactly what to expect. And last but not least, there will be an impact on business travel. And we are now experiencing it. You can basically run businesses completely remote and without any traveling. And does it have certain disadvantages? Of course it does. It is less personal, it is more stressful, etc. Right. But that will also have an impact on the amount of business travel that will be conducted. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that business travel will disappear, but I think it's a bit different to the last crisis where the technology was not as advanced. Yes. And I do remember in 28, 29, we did a lot more phone conferences, video conferences as well, but the technology wasn't as good.
Yeah, I was always going to come back at you with that because everybody was talking the same, but I agree with you. The technology has gotten a lot better and made it much more a seamless process. Axel Heifer, always nice to check in with you. Please take care. CEO of Trivago on the phone from Germany. Jason.
All right, let's head out to San Francisco now. Ed Baxter's there with World and National Headlines. Hey, Ed.
Hi, Jason. President Trump, is he backing away from a vaccine as a potential answer for both health and economic problems?
And the vaccine, I think, is less important than some of the things they're working on. They're working on a cure. and we have more than one doing it and very advanced. They're working on therapeutics, and they're working on vaccines.
Now, there is some work being done on a therapeutic that blocks the virus from totally taking over cells, but science has not ever called it a cure. New York is going to allow hospital visits, and Governor Cuomo says progress is being made. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont says tomorrow will definitely show some progress. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin in a hearing today says recovery will not be immediate.
I have said publicly, and I'll say again, I think the job numbers will get worse before they get better. So I just want to be very clear that I think that June will be a very difficult quarter.
He says he plans to exhaust direct lending funds. President Donald Trump, meanwhile, has written a letter to the WHO threatening to permanently freeze U.S. funding, telling it to get its act together in the next 30 days. China says it's ready to step in and help. And there's been much conversation about small businesses left out of the first stimulus packages, specifically minority businesses that build the economy from the bottom. Today, help from Magic Johnson.
We put up $100 million for these fantastic companies that were not part of the loan system, the stimulus package that went out.
He says the economy needs all strata, and this while the Senate is holding up its package. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants, from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need to
be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember